You're tuning into the deep dive, and today we're tackling something that's really foundational to early childhood education.
Hmm.
It might not be on your everyday radar, though. It's called Approaches to Learning, or ATL, specifically in pre-kindergarten.
Exactly. And, for anyone wanting to quickly get a real handle on what sets young kids up for success in school, well, understanding ATL is absolutely key.
Right.
It's much more than just like knowing letters and numbers. It's about their fundamental way of engaging with learning itself.
Yeah, how they do learning. And we've been digging into some pretty fascinating research on this.
We have.
Specifically, an article from the Educational Psychology Review. It's titled The Jingle Jangle of Approaches to Learning in Pre-Kindergarten. A construct with too many names.
Quite a title.
It is. Now, the term construct might sound a bit technical there.
Sure.
But think of a construct as just an idea or a concept that researchers are trying to, define and measure.
A specific thing they want to study.
Exactly. And this article points out some really interesting challenges with how we understand this particular construct, ATL.
Yeah, our goal in this deep dive is really to cut through some of the jargon
Mhm.
and clarify what ATL is actually all about, why it's such a vital piece of the puzzle when we talk about a child's early development and their readiness for school.
And to help navigate the confusing language.
Yeah, and to help you sort of navigate some of the potentially confusing language used in this field.
And that confusion is a key point, isn't it? I mean, did you know that something as seemingly straightforward as a child's readiness to learn
Yeah.
is actually described in so many different ways by experts
Hmm.
that it can create, well, more uncertainty than clarity?
It's true. It's almost like everyone's talking about the same core idea,
Right.
but using a completely different vocabulary set.
Let's dive in and see why that is. Okay, so approaches to learning, ATL. When researchers first started talking about this, what were they actually referring to?
Well, the article takes us back to the National Education Goals Panel. They really put ATL on the map as this sort of big, overarching concept.
Okay.
Their initial definition was quite broad. It covered a child's general attitudes towards learning, the habits they develop, even their individual learning styles as they, participate in educational activities.
So pretty wide-ranging.
Very. It was really seen as a primary indicator of how prepared a child is to actually enter the school environment.
Attitudes, habits, learning styles.
Uh-huh.
That still feels like it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
What were some of the first, specific things that fell under this ATL umbrella?
So the main components they initially highlighted included things like a child's openness, their willingness to try new activities,
Okay.
their initiative in seeking out learning opportunities, not just waiting to be told what to do.
Being proactive.
Exactly. Their ability to stick with a task even when it gets tricky, that's task persistence.
Right.
And importantly, their imagination.
You can definitely see why those qualities would be super helpful for a kid stepping into a classroom.
No, absolutely.
Someone who's eager to tackle a new puzzle, who naturally starts playing an educational game, doesn't get discouraged easily, and thinks creatively. That sounds like a student who's pretty much set up for success.
Totally. But the article also brings up that this very breadth, while aiming to be comprehensive,
Yeah.
has actually led to some complications in how ATL has been researched over time.
Okay, how so?
This is where the concept of the jingle fallacy comes into play.
The jingle fallacy. That's a catchy term. What does that actually mean when we're talking about ATL?
So the jingle fallacy, in essence, means we use the same label right here. It's approaches to learning,
Mm-hmm.
but it ends up being interpreted and measured in ways that aren't always consistent across different studies.
Ah, okay.
Because ATL is such a broad concept, covering so many different aspects of a child's engagement, different researchers might naturally focus on and, emphasize different parts when they're doing their research.
I see. So for someone trying to quickly understand what makes the difference in early learning, this highlights why you can't just take every study at face value, right?
Exactly.
The labels might sound the same, but the actual focus could be quite different. Like one study might say it's looking at ATL and primarily be examining how long a child keeps trying to build a tower that keeps falling.
Right, that's persistence.
While another study using the exact same ATL label might be much more interested in, say, how curious a child is about different stuff in the classroom, how they explore things.
Precisely. The article points out that even though researchers are using the same overarching term, the specific elements they're investigating and the methods they use to measure those elements can vary, sometimes significantly.
Which makes it hard to compare results.
Very hard. You're trying to compare the results of different studies on ATL, but they might not actually be examining the same underlying skills or behaviors, even though they're calling it the same thing.
So when you read a headline claiming, I don't know, some new program boosts approaches to learning,
Yeah.
you really need to dig deeper into what specific aspects of ATL were actually measured.
You do. Otherwise, you might be comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
And, this isn't just some academic squabble. Think about trying to design effective interventions to boost a child's learning readiness when we're not even consistently defining what that readiness looks like across different research studies. It makes targeted support much, much harder to implement effectively.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like saying you're studying vehicles, but one person is only looking at bicycles, and another is only looking at, like, huge trucks.
Exactly.
You're both studying vehicles, but your findings about speed and maneuverability, they're going to be wildly different and not directly comparable.
Perfect analogy.
Okay, so that's the jingle fallacy. Same name, potentially different meanings, or at least different emphasis. Now, the article also mentions something called the jangle fallacy. How does that fit into all of this?
Right, so we see how the same label can be used inconsistently.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, the article points out we might have the opposite problem, the jangle fallacy.
Okay.
This happens when researchers use different terms to describe what are essentially very similar or maybe overlapping ideas.
Oh. So instead of one label covering too many things, you have multiple labels that might actually be pointing to the same underlying concept.
You got it. Different names, same basic thing.
Okay, can you give me some concrete examples? In the context of pre-kindergarten learning, what are some of these different terms that might sound distinct but could actually be describing something very similar to ATL?
Sure. The article specifically highlights terms like adjustment, behavioral engagement, and classroom participation.
Hmm.
These have often been reported as distinct constructs in the research literature.
Right, and they do sound like different things on the surface, like adjustment, maybe how well a kid adapts to routines and gets along with others.
Could be.
Behavioral engagement sounds like how actively involved they are, paying attention, participating, and classroom participation, maybe more about answering questions, joining group stuff.
Exactly. That's how you might intuitively define them. However, and this is the crucial observation the article makes,
Yeah.
these seemingly different concepts have often been measured using the exact same assessment tools that are also used to measure ATL.
Oh, interesting. So the way they're measuring it is the same.
Often, yes. Which suggests that even though researchers are using different words, different vocabulary,
Right.
the way they're actually assessing these qualities in young kids might be tapping into the same fundamental set of skills and behaviors, the ones that fall under that broader umbrella of approaches to learning.
So it's like having, I don't know, several different brand names for what is essentially the exact same generic product.
Good way to put it.
You think you're getting something different each time, but under the hood, it's all basically the same stuff.
That's the potential issue, yes.
Okay, so we've got this conceptual clutter, as the article calls it. ATL is this broad, maybe loosely defined area. And then we have these other seemingly separate ideas that might not be so separate after all. Why does all of this conceptual mess matter? Why should someone trying to quickly get informed about early childhood be concerned about these research inconsistencies?
Well, it has implications on several important fronts. First, for researchers themselves.
Okay.
This conceptual clutter makes it significantly more challenging to build a coherent, cumulative understanding of ATL's true impact.
Because everyone's using different terms or measuring different things.
Exactly. If different studies are measuring slightly different things under the same label, or using different labels for what seems to be the same underlying thing, well, it becomes incredibly difficult to compare their findings.
Right.
It's hard to synthesize the body of research, to develop a clear, consistent picture of how ATL develops and how it influences later educational outcomes.
That makes perfect sense. Hard to make progress if everyone's speaking a slightly different language about the same topic. What about for the educators? The teachers actually working with these young kids every day. How does this jingle-jangle affect their work?
Yeah, for educators, it can lead to real confusion. If the research uses inconsistent terminology and measurements,
Yeah.
it's much harder for teachers to know which specific aspects of a child's learning engagement they should be focusing on and how to best support their development.
Like, should I focus on persistence or curiosity? or initiative.
Exactly. And how do they effectively do that if the research itself isn't providing clear, consistent definitions and ways to measure these different aspects? It can create a real lack of clarity.
I can imagine.
It makes it harder to know how to best foster these crucial early learning skills in their students. I've actually spoken to pre-kindergarten teachers who feel this way. They get bombarded with different terms, and it's hard to know which levers to pull in the classroom.
And for you, our listener, who wants to be well-informed efficiently,
Yeah.
understanding this conceptual clutter is valuable
Absolutely.
because it helps you become a more critical, more discerning consumer of information about early childhood education.
Mm-hmm.
You start to recognize that seemingly straightforward labels and headlines
Mm-hmm.
might actually mask a lot of underlying nuance and complexity in how these things are being studied and understood.
Yeah, it stops you from just accepting research findings at face value.
Right. It encourages you to look a bit deeper to ask, how are they actually defining this? How are they measuring it?
Exactly. Being aware of these fallacies helps you appreciate the inherent complexities within educational research. It helps you understand why it's not always a simple, straight path to drawing definitive conclusions.
It promotes a more nuanced perspective.
A more nuanced and informed perspective, yes, when you encounter information about early childhood development.
Now, it's important to note, the article we've been discussing, it doesn't just highlight these challenges, does it?
No, thankfully.
It also suggests there are potential ways forward, ways to maybe reduce this conceptual clutter surrounding ATL.
That's right. Well, we don't have the specific details of those suggestions right here in front of us.
Right.
The fact that the authors are actively thinking about solutions and proposing ways to bring more clarity to the field, that seems like a really positive and, frankly, necessary step.
Yeah, you'd imagine they're suggesting things like more standardized ways of defining ATL or maybe measuring its core components.
Probably along those lines, yes. Perhaps reaching a consensus on a more focused set of key indicators.
Makes sense.
And any effort, really, to bring greater clarity and consistency to the definition and measurement of such a foundational concept like approaches to learning, it's ultimately going to benefit everyone.
Not just researchers.
No, not just researchers. Educators in the field, and most importantly, the young children themselves, by hopefully leading to more effective and targeted educational practices.
Okay, so let's try and bring it all together then. We've taken a deep dive into this really important concept, approaches to learning in pre-kindergarten. At its heart, it includes a child's attitudes, habits, their overall learning styles, those key ingredients for getting ready for school, like being curious, sticking with tricky tasks.
All that good stuff. And we've unpacked the challenges that the research community is grappling with, specifically these jingle-jangle fallacies.
Right. The jingle, meaning the same term, ATL, can sometimes be used to describe different things.
Yep.
And the jangle, where different terms like adjustment or behavioral engagement might actually be measuring very similar underlying qualities in young learners.
Exactly. It's this sort of conceptual messiness.
And as we've discussed, being aware of this conceptual clutter is actually really valuable for you, our listener, because it empowers you to be a more thoughtful, more informed reader of information about how young children develop and learn.
You can approach research findings with a more critical perspective now.
Recognizing that the language used in educational research, it might not always be as clear-cut as it first appears. So for you, trying to quickly understand what makes a difference in early learning, this really highlights why you can't just take every study at face value. The labels might sound the same.
But the focus could be quite different. You need to look under the hood.
Exactly.
Which, raises a really interesting final point for you to maybe think about after this.
Oh.
If different terms in this field, early childhood ed, are essentially tapping into the same fundamental aspects of how a child engages with learning, what are the core underlying qualities that we should truly be focusing on? The ones we need to nurture to help every child thrive?
That's a great question.
Maybe by looking beyond all the various labels and focusing on these fundamental behaviors and attitudes, maybe then we can gain a deeper, more meaningful understanding of what truly fuels a child's lifelong journey of learning.